Now, from Atlanta News First, the issues that matter to you. This is On the Record.
This Sunday, the longest government shutdown in U.S. history is now over after more than 40 days of gridlock in Congress. I'm Rick Fulbaum.
And I'm Doug Reardon, the longest in history to boot. The funding fight is now at an end, but new battles are still brewing.
With my signature, the federal government will now resume normal operations.
Last week, lawmakers passed a funding bill that keeps the government running through the end of January and funds some key agencies through 2026, things like SNAP benefits. The agreement does not, however, extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits that Democrats were holding out for.
But it does set the stage for a vote on the subsidies next month. Democrats are vowing to introduce legislation to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. But some Republicans say the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, isn't working, and they want to go back to the drawing board.
There's only two ways that this fight will end. Only two ways, Mr. Speaker, that this fight will end. Either Republicans finally decide to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits this year, or the American people will throw Republicans out of their jobs next year.
Listen, any time that you're having to add subsidies to a government program, it's not working. Democrats have ruined health care in America, and that's why we need to do something about this.
All right, well, our panel joins us now. Democratic policy advocate and former candidate for Georgia State Senate, Deborah Shigley. Also, Jenny Beth Martin, co-founder and president of Tea Party Patriots. We appreciate you both being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, busy week, lots to talk about. Obviously, you know, Democrats, the one thing that they were trying to hold out for was an extension or maybe a permanence of these tax credits. They didn't get it. I mean, they got that vote, but we know that that's going to be largely symbolic. So was this kind of a loss for Democrats?
Well, let's point out, first of all, that our two Democratic senators, John Ossoff and Warnock, they did not vote to end the shutdown. So I think that is a sign that they are holding strong. The fact is, voters are still frustrated, and there is a lot of perception that at least 7 Democrats and the 1 independent did cave and not get those ACA credits. But what I think this is an opportunity for Democrats here in Georgia that are running. We've already seen several of the gubernatorial candidates come out and say, there's chaos in Washington. We need to focus on electing Democrats here in Georgia because they are going to combat what's happening in D.C. and focus on making things better for the people here in Georgia.
Jenny Beth, so Americans are going to buy their health insurance, those who do buy it on the marketplace, and they're going to see their premiums have skyrocketed. And then they're going to know that it was the Republicans who stood in the way of extending those subsidies. Marjorie Taylor Greene, of course, a Republican congresswoman from Georgia, has said that this is not very smart of the Republicans, that they should have sat down with Democrats and worked out some kind of a deal. What do you think about that? Is this going to be a problem for Republicans in the midterms next year?
I think that Obamacare is not affordable, and it was never designed to be affordable. And premiums have gone up nearly 200% since the law went into effect. The people right now who are getting these extended tax subsidies from the COVID era subsidies, if those indeed go away, the original Obamacare subsidies are still in place for the people who need health insurance the most. So it isn't going to affect them. They still have it. The COVID era increased the subsidies for people who are at 400% of the poverty line. And I think there's a time and a place for everything. During COVID, the Democrats thought it was the right thing to do to allow these subsidies, but we are long past that now. And as far as affordability goes, the government never makes things more affordable. There have been 0 times in history where it actually makes things more affordable. The government is what has driven the price up.
Mm-hmm. So politically speaking, Deborah, we're going to be looking at this very soon again, because the short-term deal that the president signed the other night only provides funding through January 30th. Are we going to be right back where we started?
It's possible. I mean, let's look at what's happened under the Trump presidencies. We have seen 2 very long shutdowns. We have seen a lot of funding gaps as well. So it is very likely that they are not going to be able to get what they want in this December vote that's supposed to go to the floor. They're adding abortion restrictions to that. So I know that's a deal that the Democrats are not going to want to make. So we may be here again.
Yeah, and real quick, Jenny Beth, we know with the Tea Party, that's a very small government-oriented, organization. But is it getting hard to support what's going on in Congress now with the way that the deficit is being treated, with the way that tariffs are being implemented? I would love your take on it.
Well, President Trump is standing up for America first. He is doing what he can to improve the economy. The One Big Beautiful Bill, which provides tax breaks for virtually all Americans, went into effect in July. We've only had that in effect now for 4 months, so it's going to take a while for the full effects of that to go into place. He's secured the border. He's reducing regulations, which will help businesses create more jobs, and he is reducing crime. As he is going about working on tariffs and trade deals, he's doing all of that to bring more manufacturing back to America, to level the playing field internationally for American businesses. And all of that is an effort to help improve the economy and improve the lives of Americans across the country.
All right, well, thank you both. Well, a controversial ban tucked inside the government funding bill could wipe out most hemp products nationwide. Atlanta News First reporter Abby Kasouris talks with supporters who say it'll close loopholes in federal law, while business owners warn it could devastate a multi-billion-dollar industry that's become part of everyday life.
One of the larger shows in the country.
At a hemp expo in Fort Lauderdale, Georgia native Amari Anderson is selling what could be his last batch of THC lemonade. It's his mom's recipe. He added THC after she was diagnosed with dementia. After drinking one, she'd finally eat.
I'm all for opening the government. I'm all for, let's figure out healthcare. But this hemp ban to be snuck in, it's crazy to me.
The Senate's new funding bill includes language redefining hemp under federal law, effectively banning most intoxicating hemp products like Delta-8 and THC, which are currently legal in Georgia.
Maybe 15% of what they currently sell will still remain legal. The rest has to come off the shelves.
Attorney Tom Church represents Georgia hemp retailers. He says the change would override state rules already in place, making things more confusing for businesses and the court system.
If the law gets even more complicated and less clear regarding the legality of these products, it's going to create more situations where people get caught up in raids or arrests.
Others say this crackdown is overdue. Michael Mumper with Georgians for Responsible Marijuana Policy says these products can be dangerous.
And they just don't understand what these really high THC potencies can do to them.
He says with new, stronger hemp strains, lawmakers should slow down.
We don't know what this is going to do yet. The science is changing so fast.
But for Anderson, hemp isn't about getting high. It's about healing. He says helping others find relief gave his mom and now him a sense of purpose. He's afraid that purpose could disappear.
Now it's all up in the air and I don't know what I'm going to do.
The hemp restrictions would take effect in a year, giving Anderson just months to figure out what's next. In Atlanta, I'm Abby Kasouris.
The 43-day government shutdown caused some major problems for people across Georgia, including the delayed payment of monthly SNAP food aid to nearly 1.5 million recipients here in our state, flight cancellations and delays for millions of Americans and businesses, plus missed wages for the tens of thousands of federal workers who live here in Georgia. Political science professor and Atlanta News First political analyst Dr. Ben Taylor joins us now on the record. So, okay, they've worked out the deal. The president signed it. How long until everything gets back up and running smoothly?
Well, it started on Thursday. So federal workers and federal employees across the country were back at work on Thursday, and they will be at work until January 30th at least. And so they've already gotten back doing the day-to-day work of government. To get things back to full capacity will take a few weeks for sure. But truly and honestly, it probably won't be until right before that January 30th deadline before the government comes back into full capacity, because we're here at Thanksgiving and then there are Christmas holidays and other holidays. And so just sort of the nature of the calendar, it's going to take a while.
And we asked this of Deborah. I want to ask you too. Are we going to be right back in this same exact spot come January 30th?
It's very likely, at least in terms of the brinksmanship. Now, will there be a shutdown? That's harder to say because there have already been discussions in the House of Representatives about just finishing out the next fiscal year until December of 2026 under a continuing resolution. And an important point about continuing resolutions is that they're functional budget cuts. So you keep the budget that was in the past fiscal year, and so if accounting for inflation, and then the law requires a 1% cut, if you do that, those are functional budget cuts. So conservatives have often been somewhat favorably disposed to those, and so that's also a likely outcome. It's just a full year CR.
All right, thanks very much, Dr. Ben Taylor.
All right, thank you guys. Next up, the race for Secretary of State in Georgia. One candidate says he's fighting to restore public trust in our election system.
People want to know, were there things kept from the public during the 2020 election?
Vernon Jones goes on the record next.
On the record right now, a new prosecutor is taking the reins in the case against President Donald Trump and more than a dozen of his allies, accused in trying to overturn the 2020 election results here in Georgia.
Yeah, it's Pete Scandalakis, the executive director of Georgia's Prosecuting Attorneys Council. He appointed himself as the new lead prosecutor in this case. It comes just a few months after the Georgia Supreme Court disqualified Fulton County DA Fani Willis over a, quote, appearance of impropriety caused by a romantic relationship she had with Special Prosecutor Nathan Wade. Scandalakis issued a statement after announcing he is taking over the case, saying in part, quote, my only objective is to ensure that this case is handled properly, fairly, and with the full transparency, discharging my duties without fear, favor, or affection.
Now, Scandalakis is taking on this new role just a few days after President Trump issued a pardon for everyone charged alongside him in the election meddling case. Georgia Lieutenant Governor Vernon Jones also received a pardon, even though he was never charged in the case. President Trump's pardons are mostly symbolic, as the president only has the authority to grant clemency for federal charges.
And election security is a priority for the candidates fighting to become Georgia's next Secretary of State. These 6 people are in the running for that race, including Trump ally Vernon Jones. The former Democrat served in the State House and the CEO of DeKalb County before switching parties and becoming a Republican in 2021, and a big Trump supporter to boot. I sat down with him to talk about his latest run for office on the record. So you have, over the years, run for many offices, from U.S. Congress to a sheriff's race. Why Secretary of State now?
I've been a chief executive officer. I've run a government with 8,000 plus employees, about a $3 billion budget. The Secretary of State's office is about 49 million with about 322, give or take, employees. So I've run a much bigger organization. All elections are held at the local level. It was my job as chief executive officer to make sure that that election office was fully funded, that the people were trained. We had enough people, adequate machines, good machines. That's one of the things that makes me uniquely prepared. I've seen elections up close at the local level and had to be responsible for them.
You have been a critic of the 2020 election results. Even now, do you still have your doubts about the safety and the fairness and the security of that election?
Let me say, many people, many Georgians have doubts. That's one of the reasons why I'm running to restore public trust. They've said, well, there's no widespread fraud. Well, then that means that there's some fraud then. No widespread fraud. What's the threshold of fraud that's acceptable? It should be zero tolerance for fraud. People want to know, were there things kept from the public during the 2020 election? I'm not here to relive the 2020 elections, but I think we do have to do another review to make sure that things were in accordance. And if there is any information that the public never knew about, I want to make that information available. I want to bring the sunshine in.
We had all these audits on 2020 that showed that there were no issues that would have affected the outcome of the election.
Yes, it brought some level of assurance, but we can never stop reaching to make sure that you're 100% feel comfortable about the election. I can tell you this, you ask any voter, would they like for Georgia election officials to constantly strive for voter integrity, transparency, free and fair elections, and never stop towards that goal and objective? I think every single one of them would agree to that. They said there was no widespread fraud. I can tell you right now, if there's no widespread fraud, then that means there's some fraud. So what's the threshold? Is it 5,000 votes is acceptable? Is it 10,000? Or is it that magic number, 11,779 votes? We don't know. The fact of it is, we want to make sure that everything is done in the sunshine and is accurate.
If you were elected Secretary of State, you would make a push to work with the General Assembly to go back to only hand-marked paper ballots, no QR codes, no touchscreens in Georgia's elections.
Many people feel as though with the election system, they like to go back to a watermarked paper ballot. We do not have to change the existing system to go to that. But that touchstone screen, if you really look at the history on it, That was for those who were impaired to have that touch tone screen. That's a tablet. That tablet can be completely detached from the existing system, and we can utilize a current system to have paper ballots that are, again, watermarked. There are certain things that people just don't feel comfortable with, Doug.
In 2021, you had switched parties from being a Democrat for most of your long career to being a Republican. Was it Donald Trump that made you want to make that party switch?
No, it had nothing to do with that. I saw Joe Biden, who I knew then. I thought he had failed as a United States Senator. I saw him as a United States Senator where he passed a crime bill, where he warehoused and jailed thousands and thousands of black men. I can make my decision on policy, and that's how I made my decision. And the Democrat Party, I didn't leave them, they left me. And so when I look at also African Americans being marginalized to feel like they have to have the government's assistance all the time, that they don't have access to not only employment but entrepreneur spirit, to go out and create businesses that will create jobs that really makes them self-sufficient. Joe Biden did not subscribe to that. So it was an easy decision between Joe Biden and Donald Trump based on policies. I didn't change, the Democrat Party changed. The black community has always been conservative. I mean, talking about faith-based, when you go to black church, you may be in there all day long. I mean, who's more faith-based than the black community? Hard to work. Who's worked harder than many African Americans? I mean, it's a part of our culture.
And you can listen to my full interview with Vernon Jones right now. Just subscribe to the On the Record podcast from Atlanta News First.
Coming up next on The Record, artificial intelligence could lead to real confusion among Georgia voters. One candidate for statewide office is now defending his use of deep fake technology. This week, voters in Georgia are heading back to the polls.
Yeah, Tuesday is election day for the state Senate District 35 seat. That district covers parts of Atlanta, Smyrna, and Mableton. 6 candidates are running in that special election. They're hoping to fill the seat left vacant by former state Senator Jason Estevez. He resigned back in September to focus more on his campaign for governor.
A debate over the use of artificial intelligence in political campaigns is now brewing across Georgia as a social media video using what's known as a deep fake is catching some unsuspecting voters off guard.
Hey, it's Senator Jon Ossoff. I just voted to keep the government shut down. They say it'll hurt farmers, but I wouldn't know. I've only seen a farm on Instagram.
Well, the video looks and sounds like Georgia Senator Jon Ossoff, but it was actually created by Congressman Mike Collins' campaign. Collins is running for the Republican nomination in the race to unseat Senator Ossoff, and he tells Atlanta News First there's nothing wrong with it.
Technology is always changing. Campaigns are always changing. Our team is doing it just like the White House, just like everybody else out there. You're not going to stop technology, just embrace it and go with it.
Collins' ad does have a disclaimer, but it's very easy to miss. Officials with the Democratic Party of Georgia sent us a statement about the video. They called the deepfake videos, quote, low integrity, and accused the Collins campaign of trying to deceive voters. And we're back now with our panel. So, Deborah, Mike Collins says that he's just using the new technology that's available, that everybody's doing it or is going to soon be doing it. What do you think?
Well, Mike Collins is right that there currently are no federal statutes that prohibit this type of deepfake technology being used in political ads. And it's interesting that Jon Ossoff was actually one who in 2023 led a hearing prompting us about the dangers of AI technology. So I think this is wrong. I think among the many campaign reforms we need to not have misleading ads. It took me off guard. I saw it in my Facebook feed and I thought, Ossoff sounds a little weird in that video. And then a few scrolls up, I saw that people were already talking about it's a deep fake. So I do think voters are sophisticated enough to be able to see through this, to see it as deceiving and to see it as he's trying to lie because we don't have policies that the voters are going to vote for.
Right. And we should note that there was a state law passed in Georgia that prohibits this within 90 days of an election. We are so far out from that, though. And so theoretically, right, Collins didn't do anything wrong by doing this. It's really good technology. How might Republicans feel about this, right? It may be in the example of a Democrat doing this to a Republican candidate.
I can't speak on behalf of all Republicans.
Sure.
I can just tell you what I think about it. The way that I look at these things is how would I feel if somebody did this to me? And I would be offended by that ad. And there are AI ads that are clearly fake and they're almost like cartoons and you know that. Okay, use that kind of thing. But when you're using something that looks extraordinarily real and that may catch some voters off guard if they're not on the lookout for AI, I just don't think that that is the right thing to do to any candidate. And at some point, we're going to have to figure out how to deal with this. And if we don't, the government will step in and create regulations, and the regulations will probably wind up doing more harm than good.
Well, you'd have to think that this would be a bipartisan issue because obviously members of both parties could fall victim to it. So we'll see how that all shakes out. Thank you both again. And that's our show. We want to thank our guests, Deborah Shigley and Jenny Beth Martin and Dr. Ben Taylor.
Thank you, of course, as always, for watching. We'll see you back here next Sunday.